Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Interfaith Explorations on Spiritual Literacy. We have a very exciting class for you today, but firstly, again, we are sponsored by the Interfaith Center, whose mission is to reduce the fear and hatred among world religions. And today's class, we have a very, very special guest whose name is Marquis Hunt. I think many of you are already probably familiar with Marquis's work because he is a social justice activist in our community. But Marquis is also an award-winning jazz musician. He is a writer, a poet, an author, a singer. He's a personal success coach, a pastor, who's also a child of two classical Pentecostal ministers, and in his words, who raised him with a little bit too much faith, and they would joke about it often. So I'm very excited and happy that Marquis is with us today. And welcome to the class, Marquis.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much, Sophia.
Thank you so much. So, and before we start with the class, I'm actually going to ask Jay, my co-facilitator, to introduce the two letters that we will be covering today. So today the letters are L for love, which is super important for Sufis like me. And maybe you have heard this story that when students would go to the school by Rumi, who was a great Sufi master and a poet, to learn from him and to spend time with him, he would often ask him the first question, have you ever loved anybody? Mm-hmm. And those who would say no, he would tell them, he would send them back and said, you're not ready to come and learn from me. Go and find somebody to love, anybody. And once you have experienced the loving of a creature, then come back to me and we'll start our studies. So that was the only prerequisite to learn from Rumi, is to be able to love somebody. So that is the first letter that we'll be covering today. And the other letter is B, B for being present. So I'm going to give it briefly to Dr. J. Mcdaniel to introduce both the letters, and then we will go to learn their impact from Marcus's story.
Well, thank you, Sophia. And I'm really so excited, Marquis, to have you with us today. So we're, as you know, we've got the spiritual alphabet, and it's got 37 letters, and L for love is one of them. L is also for listening, and B has two meanings as well, beauty and being present. And the story that Sophia just told about love, Rumi and love, is especially meaningful to me for the following reason. As a Christian, I went to seminary, and we wanted to talk about love, but I recognized that some of my teachers would say, now Christian love is different from eros or from desire. Now, desire is a good thing, but Christian love is agape. And agape is self-giving love without need for consequences. And I learned that, but it never really quite rang true, because it seemed to me that love includes desire, includes eros. And yes, love can be self-sacrificial love, giving to others without need for reward. Yes, but loving another human being too is a form of love with an uppercase L. And I think that Rumi saw the holism of love. Now, interesting, in the alphabet, C is for compassion and K is for kindness. And a lot of people might might think, well, love is compassion. But I think love is deeper than that too. So I'm glad love is in the alphabet. Now, B for being present. We talked about last week about listening as a mode of being present. There are lots of ways to be present. But I would simply like to note that when I listen to music that I really, really love, it draws me in. And in that moment, I'm not distracted. In that moment, I'm with the music. But you can't freeze that moment. You can't make it still, because music is fluid. Music is inherently temporal. So you can be with music, but you have to flow too. But you flow in an undistracted way. You're present to the music. So just a couple of thoughts on being present and on the bigness of love. And with that, Marquis, we'd like to hear your story. And by the way, however you interpret these letters is fine with us. We all can interpret them our own way. That's no big deal. So please share.
Thank you, Dr. Mcdaniel. I'll start with this, and I hope you enjoy. for indulging me and giving me an opportunity to just come into your hearts and your minds. I'm in a hotel room, so you might hear people knocking on the door or whatever. I'm in Dover, Delaware at the time. But when Sophia introduced the conversation and the letters, as I looked through the letters, love is pretty much where I launch from almost every day in terms of conversation. And it's difficult virtually impossible to love effectively outside of the present moment, since this is the only moment we have. But it's an interesting conversation because the word love just goes so many different places in terms of how we use it. Jay offered the notion of eros, which is, we refer to it often as romantic love or erotic love. And because of our culture, we see eroticism almost through one lens, usually sexually and possessively. I like to tweak or just kind of manipulate that conversation around eros just a little bit. Often when I would do couples counseling or marriage counseling before people were to get married, I'd ask the couple a couple of questions. The first question was, can you imagine how much you love this person? And think about the most extreme amount of love you could offer this person right now. So just close your eyes and just imagine it. How much love do you have to give? What does it look like? What are its boundaries? How is it structured? And when they have surmised or interpreted their answer, I then ask, improve upon it. So it's asking them to imagine stretching the boundary beyond what they may be able to ask or think. And the next question I ask is, what could this person do to disqualify themselves for that love? And it's a question I want them to postulate before they make the commitment, to see what restrictions they have placed around their heart, their mind, to be in this relationship. And oftentimes one of the challenges we face in loving is that we tend to love from the posture of the past with an inclination toward the future, and it almost makes it difficult for us to be where we are right now. I define love as a deliberate act of will. It's not just a response to favorable circumstances. And I'm not convinced that we could love on accident. I don't know that there's a such thing as accidental love. I think it almost demands a certain type of intention, a certain type of awareness, a certain type of understanding. And I grew up hearing that the word agape was unconditional love. And so, those terms almost sound redundant, to have a conditioned love. But that makes sense in our culture because we imagine love having conditions or qualifications. And so we say things in our language that are common, like, I could only love a person so much. There's a limit to my love. But how often do you hear someone saying, I could only hate a person so much? There's just a limit to how much I can hate a person. It's as though we don't imagine a restriction around hate or entropy, but we do imagine a restriction around benevolence and kindness, although most of our spiritual or sacred ideas about love and God are of a personage or an essence or an energy, a vibration that is without bounds and without boundary, without restriction. And we also imagine ourselves not being able to live this way in the moment. So we are a riddled group of people, we humans, because we can remember things. Our memories are so profound because they almost hold us hostage to what can emerge And oftentimes our relationships are centered around restricting access or restricting what comes in and what goes out. And I think boundaries are good. Structural boundaries are phenomenal. We build houses with structure, buildings with structure. We have roofs and walls because we don't want the rain to come in, but we still want the water in there. We just want a way to get it in a manner that it does not destroy the structure. The home is not the enemy of the wind or the air. It's not the enemy of the water, and the water is not the enemy of the home. But these things, we find structural ways to be in relationship with the world. And so we have these, in romance, we have these relationships called platonic love from the word Plato. You know, Plato, oddly enough, the word he used for platonic love, which was eros. It meant, and Plato used this word in the sense of his relationship with men, not really women, because in the day, women didn't have as much, we didn't recognize the power or the agency, the equality that the feminine has in our world. And so eros was, in a word, not just erotic, it meant to understand the reason a person lives, and then to join your life to that mission for the sake of helping it expand and experience its purpose. So it follows, though, in the romantic relationship, we think, of course, we have a life partner because we have joined the reason they live. We want them to live their best life. But the only way we can actually do that is to know a person. It means, Plato is saying, in order for you to love me effectively, you actually have to know me. You have to know why I exist, and you have to know how your chemistry is designed to interact with my chemistry so that we create life-affirming events and moments and experiences. And then it follows that you can only do that through agape. You can only love me with an unconditional acceptance, which means we don't get to require people to play the role, the character that we have designed for them in our lives, which is often what happens. We have a character. We have our perfect mate, our perfect parent, our perfect child, our perfect teacher, our perfect boss, our perfect friend. And then we go meet people and we qualify them for these roles. It's like a play or a movie. And so we audition. We seldom ever say, who are you? And what is it in my life that's designed to touch you in a way, or to be with you in a way that allows you to explode into that reality? Because I am here, as the Course in Miracles would say, only to be truly helpful. So being present in this sense, years ago, I learned, or I heard, and I felt that there was something in me that was like the divine or like God. And I heard these words: while I may not be all of what God is, all of me can be what God is. While I may not be all of what love is, all of me can be what love is. It's an invitation to intentionality for me to experience this part of me that is limitless and that is without restriction. That is, your capacity to love is limitless. And I often say, when you're challenged to not believe this, love anyway. Because in each moment, the present moment, we have two choices, two decisions, two options. We have an invitation to love, or we have a temptation to fear. Every moment, every breath, every interaction is a presentation of that choice. An invitation to love or a temptation to fear. And if we choose a temptation to fear, we can. The Christian scripture, I think in the book of Timothy, the writer says, God has not given us the spirit of fear in the King James Version, but that of love, power, and a sound mind. Now, if you follow that literally, it doesn't mean you can't have the spirit of fear. It just means if you have it, God didn't give it to you. And sometimes we can embrace a spirit of fear. And that temptation to fear is designed to keep things out that we think are threatening to us, which is why we have these things called enemies. And so, because our enemies, we have convinced ourselves, are stronger than our capacity to convert not them, but our understanding of who they are. How do I join you in this moment? How did I show up? How did you show up? What is your opinion of me? What is my opinion of you? Do either of those opinions serve our ability to create a life exchange, a resource making moment where we share the life of God, the life of love, the love of light, the possibilities, the potentiality? And life, I think, is often like jazz, the improvisation, the flow, where we cannot anticipate what this moment exists, what it will hold. This moment has never been. Now is all we have, and this moment has never been except for right now, and it's always here now. But with each new breath, each new life, the fabric of our reality is shifted, it's adjusted, it's manipulated, it's rearranged. It is not at all like it was. It is completely dishonest to think it is, even though it might have some hint of sameness. It just simply isn't. It is pregnant with so much exponential power, and we get to be in it to see how much more beauty we can make. We get to make the jazz, we get to improvise, we get to live the beauty of saying, wow, I get to reframe what happens next. And how can I do this in a way that's more helpful? We have to be here, be now. Just breathing, and everything about our life, every breath we take is evidence that we have let go and we have embraced, all in the same moment. Every relationship, every person, every, I like to call them people possibility. And we have restricted ourselves from living in the beauty of our limitlessness because it's difficult for us to imagine sometimes that we can improve on our best. Imagine what love looks like when it gets better than this. And then when it gets better than this. And then when it gets better than this. And then when it gets better than this. It blows our mind. It's expansive to reach into that space of divinity and eternity and infinity and power and relationship. So that's probably enough talking, enough jazz, enough music. I hope this blesses you. These are things that go through me from way beyond what's left me. The tonal influence of symphony, melodies that move in harmony, rhythms and rhymes, seasons and times, poise and reflection, the tenuous selection, the choice to be friends, to brave the distance, to love with no end, to conquer resistance. These are things that go through me. Your life from God, then to me. A life exchange for a new me in a world that's better because you touched me. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Marquis. Listening to you was like literally going through a meditation. And I will wait for Dr. Mcdaniels to join me. But as you were talking about limitlessness and having no boundaries, this poem was coming into my mind. Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, "You owe me." Look, look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. That's a poem by Hafiz, my favorite poet, but I just wanted to share it before we delve into discussion today. And I invite you all, and especially Dr. McDaniels, to facilitate the conversation. Any comments, any questions?
I have a lot of thoughts, but I would like for you all to go first if you'd like to. Does anybody have a thought or a comment, a question? You can be in the here now too. And so what you give is as important as anything. So anybody have a comment or a reflection you'd like to share in terms of what Marquis just said? Melanie?
Yes, I'm trying to figure out how to quite articulate the words because there's so much I want to say as I work with people in churches and communities about love and agape love and eros love. But one of the things he struck me that is so often I say in different ways that he said it was very melodic, and I appreciate the jazz and the singing and the explanation of love because I think I have an abundance of it. And we use love in different ways for different people, but the opposite of love is fear. And I think fear has been such a stumbling block to truly love one another, to love our neighbor, to embrace agape love. Then I wonder, how can I mean, not just me, but everyone, embrace truly agape love when we fear each other because we're different somehow. And I want us to think about, how can you love if you fear? How can you have fear through God if you hate or dislike your brother or sister and you don't know them? But I think there are some correlations I would love to have time to explore between love and fear, because fear can be a stumbling block, and the unwillingness to embrace love is a stumbling block. And I like the word that you used, that we're a riddle. I'm going to steal that one. We are a riddle of people, of give and take and love and fear. I just found it also interesting and apropos to the spiritualness of who we are. And I bring the whole of me wherever I go, but there is that special and sacred love that also I share with my husband and with my spouse. So it was all fascinating. Matter of fact, this is one of the most, all of the things that have been brought to us through Interfaith have been fabulous. But I think this was very creative, Sophia and Jay, to infuse music and to allow him to not only infuse the music, but to use it in the form of love and the presence of now, and allowing him to take us in a different, multiple different directions. That's enough. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Melanie. Yeah, Dan, do you have a comment?
I really appreciated Marquis's reference to love being an act of will. That's how Scott Peck describes it in his book, The Road Less Traveled. And he describes all the things love is not. It's not a sense of possessiveness. It's not an attempt to control. It is the flow of God's love through us to others. And it really isn't a feeling. It's an intention, as Marquis also used that word. And if we believe that God created us all and he infused us with his spirit, and he loves us all, then why should we not love one another in the way he loves us? And if we accept love originates from God and flows through us and it flows through others, then it's the vehicle through which we can connect. And addressing Melanie's question about fear, if we really open our hearts to the love of God and believe that we are like, well, there's a prayer we teach our children. Oh God, make me a hollow reed from which the pith of self hath been blown, that I may become a pure channel through which thy love will flow unto others. And children understand that immediately and deeply. So I'll stop there.
Hi. Can I
Hey.
jump in? Hi. So I work as a therapist with young people, and I'm also raising a 15-year-old. And I tell you that one of the big things on the horizon right now is the idea of love not being just between a man and a woman. And I believe that in some of our religious traditions, we discount that or we turn it into something that is evil. And I think that that is very harmful. And I also think that that's why so many young people are moving away from religion. These are like 6th graders, 7th graders. It's very important to use your correct pronouns. Like, for instance, if somebody sees themselves as non-binary, they want to be referred to as they and them. And, you know, it sounds strange. It sounds alien to us, but it is the new world that's coming up. And I'm just curious to see how that fits into the concept of love within the concept of within the context of spirituality. That's it.
Marquis, do you want to deal with? You want to respond to that?
Well, absolutely, I can do that. Spirituality, as I see it, I distinguish spirituality from faith and from religion.
Absolutely.
In the sense that spirituality, by definition or by etymology, essentially is a reference to the air or the invisible, which is that field of separation, the imagined field of separation that exists between all of us. So spirituality, we have bodies that make us look like we're different. So our bodies shape into different particles and colors and energies and smells. But those are just, these bodies are here for us to experience the fullness of who we are, the myriad of relationships and mirrors and reflective devices. So in the sense of, back to Eros, we get to be reminded when I see Becky and Sophia and Dan and Sheila, I get to be reminded that there are different dimensions of me to explore and to experience. And that spirituality, the acknowledgement of that spirituality, says there is an imagined space between us that gives us access. And what love does, and the Eros, when I visualize you or experience you or become aware that you're here, then this is the invitation I have now to also reimagine myself. And I'm hoping that you come to the moment with the same intentionality, that we get to reimagine. And sometimes we are provoked into experiencing things about ourselves that we call ugly. These are invitations as well, to not project onto the other, but to realize there is something that's in me that is being conjured up, and I need to understand why. And so these are moments, even with our children are, I think, naturally, because of the way information is being processed now, we are, since 2002, we experienced, I think, probably 300% expanded capacity to embrace data. I think it's about 340 gigabytes a day we take in, which is up 300% since 2002. So all this information makes it either more difficult or more probable that we can have opportunities to love in different ways. So I think if churches and faith-based organizations can essentially update, I'm an advocate for religious organizations updating the language, updating their operating systems to match where we are in the present moment. And I think love demands that we are present so that we can see the realities and experience them right now as they are emerging for the people who live 300 years from now.
Yes, thank you. Your name's not there and I can't remember, but.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So I'm on my iPad because my computer was screwed up.
Sorry.
It's Meg.
Meg, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. First of all, I loved what you had to say, Marquis. That was great. And I would liken what you said. I'm a musician too, but not like you. But I would liken what you said about jazz to tennis. So if we have any people who like to watch tennis out there or enjoy it at all, think about what he said next time you watch it. It's a constant changing of the terms. Things are constantly changing. You don't know what the person, it's just like conversation. You don't know what their mood is, what they're bringing to the table, and you're looking to find a way into their head. And in tennis, you want to win, but at the same time, you can do that in a fairly kind fashion and still accomplish that. But that isn't what I wanted to say. Judaism. So the word for fear is ira, which is the same word for awe. And what you said, the thing that most resonated for me today was that if you're always looking at the sort of counterbalance of love and fear, if you take fear and don't look at it as something to be afraid of, but experience that in terms of God and awe of God and how we might all see one another, that will put what you just said into my head and keep it there for a very long time. Just sort of transmuting it. So thank you.
Thanks, Meg. Marquis, I would like to offer just a reflection in response to what you said. We've talked about love, but you also mentioned improvisation. And maybe just a moment on that. I'm aware that many people turn to religion because they want answers, or because they think that it can provide rules, guidelines, laws, that in a way make improvisation unnecessary because it's already defined. But most of us, as we live our lives, realize that we're always improvising. We never face a situation that has the exact code, the exact prescription. And so moment by moment, there's really no option. We must improvise our responses. And as we do, we improvise ourselves. We create slightly new selves from the act of improvisation. So I just want to lift up for all of us that I think Marquis gives us an opportunity to consider the role of improvisation in the spiritual life, and maybe the necessity of improvisation. And I'll say one thing, Marquis, that I don't expect for people to agree, but if you do, that's great. But if you don't, that's fine. Many people like to think of God as the only reality that doesn't need to improvise. There's one reality in the universe, however understood, in which it's all already settled. No surprises, no need for improvisation. But I myself disagree. I'm a process theologian, so that's the tag you can put on it. But when I read the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, I see a God who's improvising all the time, forever responding to unique historical situations in light of what's needed in the moment at hand. Indeed, even a God who can change his mind. A God who calls people to repent, and if they do, responds one way, and if they don't, another way. So I do wonder if in the act of improvising, we don't also touch the eternal. So anyway, just some thoughts. Any response, Marquis, that you might have to any of that is fine.
I love that. The improvisation or coming into the moment, what fear, and to get back to Melanie's inquiry about fear, what fear does, in contrast to the word awe, which these two words are different etymologically, but awe, which is also reverences or respect or a revering, a revering. Imagine if we walked into each person's space, revering them. Just imagine how different the relationships would be without having to qualify them. Because oftentimes, so here we are, and when we don't fear in this capacity, there's essentially nothing to protect. And one of the reasons, as I imagine God not needing to be afraid, is because God knows that regardless of what emerges in the moment, there is enough God to respond to it, to create what's necessary now. And I think when we learn in this mode of improvisation, that when we walk into a moment, when we recognize we are in the moment, and we recognize we have a capacity in this moment to respond in love. My capacity to love is without limit. And so now, even if something is happening that has reminded me of an experience that I found unpleasant, before I react in an effort to represent that action back to itself, then I get to respond, I get to answer, which means I get to listen, acknowledge, reverence, refer to who is here and what is here. And I get to now respond, and I get to improvise. I get to create the next new moment, the next new world. It's as though the world is just happened again. It's just happened again. We just recreated it, or we just recreated it. And so we like recreation, and I like recreation. And this is what happens when we, I think, improvise, whether it's through tennis or in conversation. We can practice expanding our vocabulary. You know, and I see you. I think the word is, I'm trying to get into your mind, and you're trying to get into my mind. I want you to see me. I forget, that was the iPad that said that. I forget, Megan, is it Meg? Meg said that. The word we use is import or important. And this is why we want to love each other, is because we want to be important. We are always trying to import ourselves across the imaginary space into the next mind or body, because we have convinced ourselves that we are disconnected, and we are experiencing a disconnect. But love is asking us to experience the reconnect.
May I ask a quick question? Do you have a suggestion for how to import? Say you're having a conversation, and maybe each of you is in a box, but say I feel I'm pretty open, and the other person is in a bit of a box. Do you have any hints, life hacks to get them to move into a more present conversation?
I don't know that, I wouldn't say I have a prescriptive. I will lean on the next L word, which is listen. Because listening, it's easier to improvise when you know how to listen to what's happening in the music. And even, you can bring so many chords that a person can play, but if you listen to jazz or even classical, you realize how much possibility. Well, there's so many possibilities that exist. And so what I try to do, and I have to practice this daily, is I am always in the present moment. And even if I'm not always aware that I'm in the present moment, but I am always in the present. And even so, sometimes I'm with someone or someones who are not aware that the moment is present. It feels as though it's about something past, but we are the ones who bring our past to the present moment and use that awareness or that memory trap to still reconfigure the present moment. So what I would do, I try to always say, okay, why am I here? Why am I hearing this? And what can I create as a result of it? And understanding that what I am creating, we are all creating together still. My desire is not as much to get you to be aware of it, but because I can never make anyone aware of anything, I can become a catalyst. I am a respondent, a correspondent, but ultimately the experience that I'm having is all mine. And what I want is to get not you to the next best place as my intention. I mean, that should be a byproduct. But I'm still interested in getting to my next best version of me. And since you're in this moment with me, I may start the moment in grief and being aware and being present, or being in the jazz. I have to understand, is this a blue chord or is it a jazz chord? Is it a country chord? Is it a reggae chord? And is it 3 notes? Is it 5? If it's a 3-note chord, then that means, this for anybody who knows music, that means they're in a major scale or any scale, there are at least 7 notes. So if it's a 3-note chord, that means I have 4 more possibilities I can introduce to it that could create a different color, a different tone, a different rhythm. And the more I am aware of the possibilities, then the more limitless I feel and the more wealthy I feel. Because when you love, you give from your strength, not from your weakness. So our job is to find that depth, that wealth of resource that lives inside of us and draw from it. To look within, to see that limitlessness. When I look at you, I look without, which means I'm looking outside of myself to see who you are in your wealth. Then we look between so we can see what we create together. And then we both look beyond to see how this new unit can expand into the world of more possibilities.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Sophia, you have anything you want to say? Oh, you're muted. Sophia, you're muted. Oh.
Sorry, I was muting and unmuting everybody in the class, so I forgot that I myself was muted. Let me just read these couple of comments that we have had from some class members before I add my own thoughts to anything. So we have a comment from Sally Fitzsizer, who says, "Love is powerful." Yes, indeed, Sally. Thank you for your comment. And then we also have a comment, Marquis from Mary's iPad. And the comment is, "I love that all faiths embrace light and love." So I wanted to add these two to your conversation if any of you would want to respond to these. We still have like almost 5 minutes if you have any final thoughts before we close today's class.
Yeah, I have one more comment, but I want you to make yours rather than me, unless you're collecting your thoughts, in which case I'll make mine.
Go ahead, yes.
Marquis, my father-in-law died recently of Alzheimer's. He was 95. And to love him, I needed to reframe in my mind who he was, because he wasn't the person that he was 10, 15 years ago. So I well know the need. Love involves reframing and reimagining. And that's an improvisational act too. but it occurs to me that I myself am also aging, bodily, cognitively, I'm sure. And so in a way, I have to reframe myself, not just others. And part of my reframing is to think of my own limits and accept them and think of them in new ways. And so my question is, do you think that self-love, self-acceptance, sometimes includes not so much a sense of infinite possibility, but a different kind of love? It's loving the finitude, loving the limits, learning to live with the limits in a creative way. So if you could kind of link what you said about love with that question of the limits that human beings do have, but they can be kind of beautiful sometimes. Sometimes they're not, but sometimes they are. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly. We have a narrative about ourselves, and we have facts about who we are. And things are, you have hydrogen, iron, oxygen. Come on in. These things are what they are. Come on in. Yeah, I'm ready to go, but you can come on in if you want. I'm leaving out.
I'll have to wait.
Okay.
How long is it going to be?
3 to 5 minutes. Thank you so much. That's the limit.
That's improvisation.
Love asks that I have the experience with what is. The being present is what is. And I think that's what I hear in the word limit. What is. Limit structures what is. And love says, okay, now how can I reconfigure what is in a way that creates the next new limitlessness? And we have told ourselves an idea that we are what we were. And most of us get in relationships trying to maintain what we were or how we met and what we remembered. The truth is none of us are that, ever. We just are not always stepping away, sometimes away from our biography to see how much our biography is constantly changing. This is probably too late in the conversation to say this, but I think we can be very violent to each other and to ourselves in relationship by demanding that we remain how we remembered meeting each other. It's imperative in the new world, especially now, that we give ourselves breathing room to continue to journey into what we are becoming, what we always have been becoming.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Sophia.
I think this is, I want to jump in on your question, Jay. I think this is a really important theme for us in our interfaith work, because as we constantly are meeting new people and concepts and theories and ideas and introducing them to others too, we are of course thinking about and reimagining others, but what happens inside us, how we constantly reimagine our own limits, is more important for me, because I feel that every single day of my work, as I meet new people whom I want to include in this growing spiritual space around me, I have to keep on breaking my limits, and then unconsciously as a human being, I create new limits, which even though I don't want to, it just happens. And I think that is the biggest challenge that I have faced in this work of how to not create the new limits, or how to uncreate. Because somehow we are just wired to create those boundaries around us. So how to unwire ourselves in ways maybe you all have learned Am I making myself clear here with my question?
Yes. Yeah.
I was hoping the question was rhetorical. There, I got to check out of this room, you all. But
It's okay.
I'll be back, and I'll write an answer into that question.
All right. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Marcus, thank you so much. And before you go, I want to thank you for bringing your music in today's conversation and letting us live through the vibrational frequency of your music. I think that was really, really important for our today's conversation. And thank you for being here. I'm glad you said you'll be coming back because we do want you to come back. And one particular thing I want to thank you about is talking about intentionality. As we are working on our hearts to constantly break the limits and experience the expansiveness of the limitless love, thank you to bring intentionality in that conversation. We'll see you soon. I am going to close today's session with a poem, as always. We will be meeting next week with our new letter, which is V for vision. And we'll be talking about dreams and how they lead us into visions for ourselves, for our communities, and for the larger universe. But before we go today, I would read a few words from Hafiz to you. I have learned so much. I have learned so much from God that I can no longer call myself a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, or a Jew. The truth has shared so much of itself with me that I can no longer call myself a man, a woman, an angel, or even a pure soul. Love has befriended me so completely. It has turned me to ashes and freed me of every concept and image that my mind has ever known. I have loved so much. Thank you for being here. We'll see you all next week.